Start Here, Introduction to Zero Trust. I'm Jacob Serpa, I'll be your moderator today, and I'm joined by Simon Tompson, Director of Platform Marketing at Zscaler. Now, before we start, I have a couple of housekeeping items for everybody. First, we will have time for Q&A at the end of today's session. So if you have questions, either right now or at any point during the presentation, please put those into the dashboard in front of you, and we will be sure to get to as many of those questions as possible. Second, there are resources available to you in the dashboard in front of you as well. So if something seems interesting, go ahead and download it. It's free. You can dive a little bit deeper and learn a little bit more. Now, with that said, here is our agenda for today. We're going to begin by hearing Simon tell us about the problem. What's happening with traditional networking and security, with the way that work is done today, and why is the traditional model no longer fit for purpose? Then we'll talk about what is zero trust? What do we mean when we say that? Why is it a better fit for the modern business world? Then we'll also talk about the user experience under this new architecture and what your employees might be able to expect once you make this change. Then we'll change things up a little bit. We'll talk about Zscaler specifically, as well as Zscaler's cloud security platform, the Zero Trust Exchange. And then to conclude, we'll talk about where you can start this journey to zero trust in terms of some first use cases or key initiatives, things you'll want to consider, as well as some practical next steps that you can take right after this call. So with that, Simon, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome intro. Thanks very much, Jacob. And hello, everybody. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to join us on this webinar to learn a little bit more about zero trust. As we said, we're going to start things at a pretty introductory level. The intent here is to give you just really an overview. If you're struggling with all of the complexity, all the acronyms that are typically thrown at you in the cybersecurity world, don't worry, we've all been there. And the goal here is to just try to explain in really basic terms what we're talking about when we reference zero trust and how your business can benefit from it. So let's get things rolling. So have you noticed that you can work anywhere where there is an internet connection? You might be today sitting at home, you might be in a cafe, you might be in the office. The truth is that you're now able to do your job pretty much anywhere. And of course, a lot of this was driven by the move during the pandemic and how we had to adjust to this work from anywhere world, this reality that we had to embrace. What is that now? 3.5 years ago, seems like a lifetime. You can see on the diagrams here the way that has shaken up the world of work. And it's been also driven by the fact that a lot of applications now are based in the cloud. So you are mostly accessing your applications through a web browser, or at least there is a web component to the applications that you're using to do your job. And of course, that frees us up enormously. It means that both users and applications can and typically are anywhere. And the diagram right in the middle there, it's kind of small, but you can see the direction of the lines. It shows that shift that happened in the spring of 2020. And as you can see, it stayed fairly stable since then. And we keep hearing stories back and forth in the media about working from home and working back at the office again. The truth is, hybrid is here to stay. We've proven that we can do it. And so we're just now moving forward with this approach. And this is what we need to design for, because everybody is now able to work in this way. Now, the problem is that this creates a challenge for the world that we have built. So I'm sure many of you have grown up in a world, as I did, that was built around the internet being used for communication and being able to reach everything. It's a very exciting time to get that freedom and that flexibility. We don't all have to work in the office anymore. It's not all applications in a data center sitting in the building. But the challenge is that we built this world of security to serve that world. We chose to serve a world where everything was really together in a single monolithic location. And so when we start to move our users anywhere, when they are working from home, working from a coffee shop, when our applications are moving to clouds, be they public clouds or private clouds, we've now got to put in all this security infrastructure to try to manage that reality, the fact that we need to be able to connect those users to those applications. How are we going to do security? And the answer in the old way of thinking about things which is still very much prevalent, by the way, is to throw all these boxes you can see in the middle at the problem. And they do the job. They do actually help to significantly reduce the amount of risk that's there, but they certainly, as we will see in this presentation, don't eliminate it. We really need something better for a world where users and applications can be anywhere. Let's do a little bit of a history lesson. It's interesting to go back and have a look at how things have developed over time. If we go back as far as the late 60s, early 70s, that's really when the internet as we know it today started to appear. And it was mostly based around communication over email. The web hadn't been invented at that time. So it was a very straightforward world. And we were very much focused as a technology society on trying to just connect users to things and to each other so that they could communicate. And wonderful, brave new world that we created. But then in the late 1980s, somebody figured out how to create a thing called a worm, which was an early word. You don't really hear it anymore, but this was really about trying to infiltrate and slow down those communications. And this was really the beginning of starting to see some considerations for security. So we then started to see, as we turned the decade into the 90s, conversation around firewalls, and the first commercially available firewall product in 1991. Now, those of you with a networking background, you'll no doubt be familiar with RFCs, the request for comments. This is a vast library of documentation that captures essentially the standards that build the internet. And we have an RFC specifically that documents how to build firewalls and firewall-based architectures. And so that one was created in 1994. I'm going to show you an excerpt from that one in just a moment. It's quite interesting. And then we realized that we needed to be able to securely connect people. We started to see this ability for people to work remotely, even if it was at that time over a modem. Probably a few of you have used those in your time. I did, and it's thank goodness we don't work in that world anymore. But you needed to start thinking about secure connection. And that's where the first VPN technology came along, a protocol called PPTP in 1996. And then we introduced something called network access control. This is all about making sure that users were appropriately connected to their network. They're only given permission to join if they authenticate before they actually join that network. So we were trying really hard to build this security infrastructure on top of this internet that we'd created that was built on concept of connectivity and reachability. As we get into the 2000s, we started to have a little bit of an awakening around security and this idea that what we'd built doesn't really work anymore, because suddenly you don't have all the users sitting within the perimeter, as you see with the diagram on the right-hand side. Not everybody was working in the building, not everybody is inside the castle walls, and therefore we need to start thinking about vulnerabilities when people are outside that place. So the Jericho Forum was created in 2004, and this started to talk about deperimeterization. Try saying that a few times rapidly. And that is really an important step, because we were starting to think about how to address this challenge of users and applications moving away from those central monolithic locations. The first analyst to pick up on this and really start to popularize the concept of zero trust, that happened in 2010, and a Forrester analyst actually wrote a paper to start to codify and talk about this zero trust concept as it applies to the world of IT. And then it became more formally codified in 2020, so not that long ago, actually. This is the North American Standards Group, and so NIST created a standard for zero trust. That's really, if you like the Bible, you want to go and look at that and see what it's all about. Zero trust, that's the place to go and have a look. And now in the last couple of years, we've started to see mandates coming along for moves to zero trust. And so most notably here in the United States, it's now becoming mandatory for public bodies, anybody working with the government as well, to actually adopt a zero trust architecture. So this isn't just a nice to have, this isn't just an alternative for you to consider, it's starting to become mandatory because people are realizing this is really the only and correct way to secure our modern working world. Now, I promised you that we would have a look at a little quote from that firewalls RFC. And I'm just pulling out a few words here, and this is great. Like, people were worried as early as '94 when they were codifying firewalls that some members of the committee working on the paper were concerned that, that firewalls could provide this hard, crunchy outside with a soft, chewy center. Yeah, these were really technical documents, as you can see, but they really have recognized early on that there's a potential flaw in this whole paradigm. So this is an old scroll. It's a long time ago, and we theoretically don't need to worry about this anymore. But isn't it interesting that even at the beginning, people saw the potential weakness with firewalls? The challenge is that if we have a firewall-centered architecture, in other words, we're trying to protect all these different points around the network and the internet access points to our users and to their applications, we need to essentially show them everything. So a firewall-centric architecture is a little bit like allowing an unescorted visitor to just walk around your office. Sure, they need to authenticate to get into the building. We need to make sure that they are somebody that we're going to allow in. But once they get in, the risk with this architecture is that you get the opportunity to roam more easily. You can see what applications are exposing a surface that you could potentially attack. So this is a big problem with this firewall-based architecture. And of course, if you're using a VPN, you're just extending that. So you're extending the ability to be able to start roaming around the office. So let's just dig into that in a bit more detail. Why do firewalls and VPN-based architectures create issues? So as soon as we start moving out from the core office, if you like, the head office, the data center location, we're starting to use things like branch offices or factories. We're starting to move some applications to public cloud services or private cloud services. In this case, we're looking at AWS and Azure, two of the leading providers for private cloud services, and we're extending the VPNs. So this is how we do it in the old world, if you like. And all we do is we start building and adding more firewalls, creating more VPNs between users who are working remotely and enabling them to access all the applications that they need to be able to get hold of. So the problem there is that we're starting to expose more and more public IP addresses, because this is how the internet is built. You have to have a next hop to be able to reach your next destination. So to be able to access these applications and to be able to access these services, you need to expose IP addresses publicly. As soon as you do that, and if you've ever created a server just for fun at home and you've put a web server online, and yes, I am geeky enough to have done that, I admit, you start to see immediately it starts getting attacked. People try and log into it. People try to see what they can do with this thing, and they're looking for vulnerabilities straight away. So that's a risk with an attack surface. And if somebody finds one and they know what they're doing, they can work to compromise you, and they can work to find ways around that firewall that you've put in place. Once they're inside, as we've seen on the last diagram, they can roam around your building. They can use VPN to roam around your infrastructure, looking for applications, looking for vulnerabilities that they can make use of. So they move laterally. And of course, their goal in many cases is to steal your data. They're looking for the crown jewels of your business, your most important intellectual property. They want to steal that. They want to apply a ransomware challenge for you. And this is how they do it. So this is a problem. As you can see, we've opened up this superhighway, which is wonderful for connecting people. But if people are able to get in and get onto that superhighway, you've got a potential problem on your hands. And I think the title of this slide is one of the most powerful ones for this argument. Every company you hear about in the media, they all have firewalls. Everybody has firewalls, and oftentimes when a problem occurs, the response for the IT team is to add more firewalls. It's just to compound the challenge, if you like. These are two of the most famous breaches that have occurred historically. You can look these up, and in fact, there's a great story on The Verge covering the Maersk vulnerability. I think that was around 2018. And they really just locked up so much supply chain and put Maersk essentially out of business for 2 weeks, whilst they had to entirely rebuild their server infrastructure to recover and get back in business again. And anybody living on the eastern side of the United States will no doubt remember what happened with this pipeline attack, where the service was essentially taken out for a time. And so again, there were problems to disruption that impacted real people in their normal lives in terms of getting fuel to where it needed to be. So these are significant problems, And every day you hear new ones. I've no doubt we'll be updating this slide as time goes on. There have been new announcements just in the last few weeks around casinos, I think we've heard about. And you don't have to look very far on the IT media to hear about these happening. And I challenge you to look for any that are not using firewalls. It's really a problem that we need to address. So we need to think differently. It's a persistent threat landscape that we see out there, and that's what we all need to adjust to. This isn't a one and done. If we have a breach or if we have a vulnerability, we fix it, we move on with our lives. This is happening continuously, and we'll show you the scale of that in just a few moments. But we've actually done some research ourselves and seen that ransomware attacks have increased 37% year over year in 2023. That's a very significant percentage increase, and it's not likely to be slowing down. As we'll see, we've now got artificial intelligence starting to play a role in the development of potential attacks for vulnerabilities that are out there. I mentioned about the fact that Zero Trust is now being compelled. This is a slightly different requirement here that's come in place in the United States. So for publicly traded companies, now required to disclose material cybersecurity incidents to the SEC, and that's within 4 days of that breach happening. So this is, a very significant impact for a lot of organizations, given that breaches are a reality, are a fact of life. So of course, we need to be thinking very much about how we can change our architecture and get better at protecting ourselves. And companies are worried about this. You can tell that because there is ongoing, quite significant demand for cyber insurance, where you're essentially protecting yourself in case you are breached and compromised in some way. So it's a significant reality that we need to adjust to, as we've said. Let me pause for a second.
Well, Simon, that is a fantastic articulation of where we've been as organizations from a networking and security perspective, as well as some of the challenges that that's leading to today. But maybe we can talk now about where we're going. Tell us about the future. Tell us about Zero Trust, what it does, why it's different, and why it matters.
Yeah, happy to do that. And yeah, I mean, it's a great point. We've spent time here essentially setting up the problem, showing you what you're potentially living with today in your own reality. Now we want to talk about Zero Trust at a theoretical level, just explain the architecture to you. It's a strange name. I was a little bit confused by it myself when I first heard it. Zero Trust, really? Is that what you actually mean? Really, Zero Trust? So we're going to break that down, explain that in just a second. What we're doing here is reimagining connectivity for this modern world that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. So what is a Zero Trust architecture? Well, first of all, there is no product you can go out and buy. Don't go onto Amazon looking for a Zero Trust. You're not going to find it there. You can't buy it. You might be able to buy a book about it, but that's as far as you're going to get. It's really best thought about as a methodology, an architecture that enables you to pursue a different kind of IT infrastructure based around zero implicit trust. So obviously Zero Trust, we'd get nothing done. So what we're actually doing is we are saying we're not going to trust you by default. We are going to make sure we check you out. We're not going to imply any trust. You're going to earn that trust to connect to what it is that you need. So this diagram is taken from that NIST standard I mentioned a few slides ago, and it's really perhaps the most generic version of a Zero Trust architecture. You see here comes the user on the left-hand side. They are untrusted at the beginning of the conversation. They then enter a policy enforcement point where we're able to apply certain rules. We're able to look up and see, is this user actually okay? Are we going to allow Jacob to connect to his application? We're going to check out the device he's using, and only then are we going to provide permission and a very limited amount of trust that connects Jacob just purely to the application that he's trying to reach. So there is no open door with this approach. You're only shown one direction you can go in to connect to a specific application, and that's based on the credentials that we look at. So let's look into this in a little bit more detail. Here's how we really think about this here at Zscaler. Here comes the user, and it might be somebody, it might not just be a user, it could also be perhaps a partner company who's wanting to do business. and connect with us. First thing we're going to do is we're going to say, stop. Who are you? We're going to identify you. We're going to find out what credentials you have. Are you even somebody who is allowed to move on to the next step? So you get nowhere until you've been past that first step. Next, we want to know where you're going. Which application are you trying to reach? Is it a publicly hosted application, or is it one on a private hosted data center? We're going to look and see what you're actually trying to get to. So then we look at an application policy. Is Jacob actually allowed to get to that application that he's trying to get to? And then we're going to ask, what's the risk? So we're going to actually do a little bit of an analysis of Jacob's device. We're going to look at what it's running. Are its virus credentials up to date, for example? What's the behavior pattern that we typically see? So we deploy various different technologies to ensure that we're actually allowing somebody who is safe into that environment before they go any further. So to do that, we do partner with other companies, so we can use existing databases that you already have for your users. So things like Microsoft Azure and Active Directory, Okta and CrowdStrike and so on. So we're not limited to what you see on the slide there, but that's just a sprinkling, some of the biggest names in this business. And once we've been through all of these stages, we've identified that Jacob is safe, that Jacob's device is safe, then we can start to look at a decision. Do we allow this person to connect? And we have two decisions to make. We can go off to public applications, so things like Gmail or Salesforce.com, applications that are hosted on the internet itself, not on a data center that we manage. And what about private applications? So our own internal applications that we run, we're going to identify if we can connect through to those. Now, I want to point out one little detail on this slide. Look at the direction of the arrows. First of all, on the left-hand side, so we have a connection that goes from Zscaler out to the internet to make that connection through to the internet-hosted application. But in the case of private applications, remember we talked about attack surfaces earlier on. We want to eliminate attack surfaces. We don't want to be able to find anything that is part of our business, that's part of our operations. And so the private applications that we run, either in our own data centers or as hosted on a service like AWS or Azure, we actually use a device called an application connector, an app connector, to form an inside-out connection. So in other words, that is advertising the availability of applications back to Zscaler. And so then what we do is we essentially join the two together. So we say, okay, Jacob is allowed to access this private application. We're going to make the connection. We can already see it. But crucially, there's no public attack surface for those private applications that are hosted in the cloud or in data center. So with this approach, we're able to stop those cyber attacks, stop the data loss that we talked about earlier. That's so very, very important. We're preventing lateral movement. We don't connect to networks. We only connect Jacob to the applications that he's trying to reach one at a time. So it's session-based as opposed to an open highway where you can access everything. And as I mentioned, we're minimizing that attack surface by making it an inside-out connection from the private data centers back to Zscaler. So that door analogy, remember that one. So zero trust architecture, once we put this in place, it's like hiding your buildings and escorting a visitor to a specific meeting room within your building. You now can't even see what's behind those doors. You don't know that, may not even know that the doors are there. And so you're really just getting that access through a single door to get to the application that you're trying to reach. So you can think of Zscaler, we sit in the middle, you see the Zero Trust Exchange there. You can think of us like a switchboard. The idea of a switchboard is that you make a connection directly between point A and point B, but you broker that connection. You actually make it on behalf of users A and B, whatever they are. Think about the telephone analogy. In the old days, a switchboard was literally that. You were connecting, a person would actually make a connection between person A and person B to enable that phone call to happen. There was no public way to directly connect across the telephone network. So Zscaler operates very much the same way. And again, you're connecting just to applications and not to networks.
Yeah, I love that analogy of the visitor coming to the office and how things are different between those standard perimeter-based kinds of architectures and then a zero trust architecture. But I'm sure that one thing that people are wondering as they're listening to this so far is, okay, that sounds good, but what's the end user experience? For our employees who are going to be, trying to access resources, what is this zero trust architecture going to amount to on their side of things? What about their experience?
Yeah, it's a really important one, I think, because we are a SaaS service in a sense, right? We are actually providing you with no hardware. We're providing you with a software-based solution for your security. And so sometimes I think when you're learning about a new service like this, it's hard to visualize. What does it actually look like for me? So what we've done here is just created a very simple set of screen captures so you can get a sense of that. And this is taken from a Mac, but it actually looks almost identical on Windows and indeed on the mobile operating systems as well. You have a little agent sitting on your machine, and that is called the client connector. And the clue's in the name. This is all about getting you connected to the Zero Trust Exchange, and this helps us to form these secure tunnels for all the traffic that is leaving and coming back to your device. And so that covers connections to private services. You can see there, if you look at the diagram, it says private access and internet security. So those are your private apps and also your publicly accessible applications. We create tunnels to each of those, and then the user authenticates. They use multi-factor authentication, typically a biometric, to be able to get connected, or perhaps something like Google Authenticator, so a code. So we're never relying on a password alone. And only once you've got through that, that's your credentials checked out, then you get connected to those applications that your IT administrator has given you permission to access. And that's, of course, the really important point. You don't, at any point in this model, get free open reign access to whatever you like. Another thing which this tool does very effectively is it helps to monitor the digital experience that you're having through the Zero Trust Exchange. This is a proxy-based architecture, and so part of making that work successfully for you is ensuring that you're having a good user experience, and your IT team will be able to check out the experience that the users are having. They're also able to identify any potential choke points between the application and you. So it might be an internet service provider connection, perhaps, or a WAN link somewhere where there's latency, where there's jitter, problems that can cause issues with applications, especially real-time applications like Zoom calls and voice over IP, that kind of thing. So there are tools built in to help with that as well, and troubleshooting. So the key thing here to keep in mind is that the experience is very similar across these different operating systems. So nice and simple. This sits in the background. You don't even need to open this most of the time. It's only when you're logging in or if you need to actually go in and do any troubleshooting together with your IT team if you're working remotely. So that's the experience.
Excellent. So we've talked a bit about Zero Trust architecture. We've made some allusions to Zscaler. Let's talk more concretely about Zscaler in particular. What can you tell us about the cloud security platform, the Zero Trust Exchange, and how some of this stuff works with Zscaler?
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. And we spent time obviously talking about Zero Trust at a theoretical level. And I'm sure that that's all very clear in your mind right now. If it isn't, ask questions in the Q&A because we really want to make sure we're helping you with that. But now we're going to talk about how Zscaler approaches it and why you might consider Zscaler for your Zero Trust journey that I'm sure you're excited in embarking on. First of all, we're going to do a little history lesson for Zscaler itself. Fun fact, Zscaler stands for Zenith of Scalability. And so we really have thought at every stage as we've been building this business since 2007 about how it can be fully scalable. So we have really huge reach. You're going to see the truth about that scale in the next slide where we start to talk about some real numbers and scale that we operate at every day. But that's been part of our thinking from the very beginning as we built this business. Now, Zscaler has been a consistent pioneer in the space of Zero Trust and in the technologies that are associated with internet-based or web-based security. So as early as 2011, we were recognized by Gartner as the leader for secure web gateway. That's a technology which enables you to protect end users working at home from any nasties that are out there on the internet. And so that was a very long time ago now. And in 2016, we started to move into the world of private applications, and again, pioneered the technology around zero trust network access so that you can access your private applications when those move to cloud from your own data center as well. Zscaler became a public company back in 2018, but we continue to, of course, innovate. We brought in that digital experience monitoring that I was mentioning to you on the previous slide. And then we did a great job, I think, of moving everything to renewable energy. We did that early. I mean, that's something which a lot of businesses are aspiring to at this point in time. And then we continue the innovation by starting to look beyond just connecting users to their applications. We also started to think about some of the other ways in which what is using applications. And the truth is, when you do some digging, there are applications talking to other applications. We think of that as workloads. There's also devices that you have deployed in your environment. So IoT devices like security cameras or badge readers. Those are all talking out to the internet in some way. They may be doing so just for firmware, but they typically do potentially pose a risk. So that's something else we need to think about. Those who are working in the manufacturing world will be familiar with operational technology, or OT. That's another area where we focus on providing a more secure experience. So we're really just broadening out beyond just the concept of a user connecting to an application. This year, we made an announcement around branch sites. So zero trust connectivity for branches, where we're trying to think about how we can provide protection for all of those users and devices sitting out at branch locations without necessarily needing to have a client connector loaded onto the device. And again, you'll see for Gartner, we were recognized for Security Service Edge. That's a technology or a paradigm, if you like, that encompasses a number of different areas of zero trust that we pioneered a lot of, and that we're recognized as a leader in. So it's a good news story. This is a very well-established operation at this point in time. So our mission, as we describe it today, is to secure, simplify, and transform businesses. So this breaks down into looking at reducing business risk, cutting cost and complexity out. Remember that first slide I showed with all those boxes? We're going to come back to that. And then transforming in terms of increasing business agility, just by making it faster and easier to spin up new sites, faster and easier to connect your partner companies you work with, and to get new employees securely connected in and productive. In terms of Zscaler's strength, I mentioned already we're on NASDAQ. We're in the NASDAQ 100 now. Very large amount of revenue in place, so we're a fast-growing operation, as you can see. We're also market leader, so 40% plus of Fortune 500 members are customers of Zscaler, and we have over 40 million users secured around the world. A lot of very happy customers as well. So anybody who works in marketing, you'll be familiar with the NPS score or the Net Promoter Score. And if you don't work in marketing, don't worry. This really is just about how satisfied people are with the businesses that they are working with. So the Net Promoter Score for Zscaler is typically in the range of 70 plus, which is significantly higher than the average for SaaS services that are out there, where the average is just around 30. So we've got a lot of very happy customers once they get on board with Zscaler. And we've proven ourselves, of course, over 12 plus years of operational excellence. Now, getting into scale, look at the scale here. World's largest security cloud, over 300 billion daily transactions. That's 20 times the number of Google searches that are performed around the world. That's a mind-blowing number if you think about it. We've had that consistent leadership with Gartner, one of the leading industry analysts, of course, and our 100% renewable energy. Let's move on to talk about the data centers and where they're located, because that's also important. Having a lot of data centers matters. These are points of presence, as we refer to them on the internet. And this is how we try to get your experience to work as efficiently as possible, because we don't process everything in a central data center. We have it dispersed around 150 points of presence located around the world in all large population centers spread around the world. Now, this is not a static number either. This is something we're continually growing. There's new ones being added. You can even see, if your eyes are really good, that we've got a couple on here that are coming soon that we're working on spinning up right now. Key point is to have it as close to you as possible, because that reduces your latency as you're connecting through to your applications through Zscaler. Because we are in the middle, it's super important that we spend a lot of time focusing on that. And I mentioned the 300 billion, but also 500 trillion daily signals. What does that mean? Well, daily signals, these are pieces of telemetry that we're able to use to continue to improve the service and the experience that our customers are having. Look, here's the speed at which everything is moving right now. The cloud is working super hard, and we managed to figure out how to make this real time for you. So you're looking at how the cloud is performing in real time. It's not really real time, I'm lying. This is a snapshot of what it looks like, but we do have a live version of this, which you can find if you look around on zscaler.com, look for Threat Labs, you'll find the information in more real time. But it's a very large number of transactions that we're processing at any one time. We are, of course, monitoring that. So we know how hard our cloud is working to serve our customers. But just look at the number of policies that are being enforced every second and the number of threats that are being blocked every single second for our customers. And this is obviously 24/7 operations. So we're absolutely there protecting people every single day. Now, I want to just talk about the solution areas. We've got 4 key areas that we talk about. Cyber threat protection is what most people think about first when they think about security. So this is your classic protection for your users. This is trying to look for ways to mitigate against bad actors who are trying to get into your network, who are trying to compromise, and how are trying to get that lateral movement. But of course, the reason they're trying to do that is because they're trying to get at your data. So we need to think about how we prevent that data loss. That's where data protection comes in. It's a slightly different discipline. And if you want to learn more, of course, we have much more detailed webinars you can follow to learn more in any one of these areas. Sitting on top of that, we also now have a growing number of services around analytics. So customers need to know, of course, what the real-time experience looks like. They need to know what their performance looks like for their end users. They also need to know what potential risks they have with the setup that they have in place right now. So our business analytics really help you with that. They take advantage of that huge number of daily signals that we're getting, the trillions of daily telemetry signals that help us build better analytics and better guidance for our customers on how to improve their security posture. And then, of course, none of this works if you don't think about connectivity. We need to be able to connect users. We need to be able to connect third parties, customers, branches, factories, public clouds, and data centers. All these things need to be able to get access to the Zero Trust Exchange so that you can make those secure session-based connections, but between point A and point B, wherever it happens to be. And we back all of that up, of course, with that big distributed cloud that I mentioned previously. Don't worry too much about what you see across the bottom of the screen. This is really how we package up our offers. So when we get into a conversation with you, you'll start to hear us talking about Zscaler for users or for workloads, B2B, and IoT OT. These are sort of different areas that you can look at for your journey. Of course, most people start with users, and that's what we're mostly focused on for the examples we want to talk about in a few moments. I touched on artificial intelligence and mentioned that, of course, it's now a technology that we hear about everywhere, every single day. You're going to see an article about AI in 2023, and there's good AI and there's bad AI. And so we do, unfortunately, have the reality that you've got some bad actors there who are starting to realize the potential of this technology to accelerate the work that they're doing to try to compromise you. So as if it wasn't bad enough before, we're now facing an accelerating problem backed by the power of artificial intelligence. Now, fortunately, it works both ways because we're also fighting the fight and leveraging the technology from our side with enterprise-grade artificial intelligence, that huge amount of telemetry, which helps us to train those large language models, the LLMs, so that we can improve our ability to serve you and protect you. So we've got tools in place already, faster time to detection with cyber protection, zero-day attacks, potential attacks. A better way to look at securing unstructured data with automated classification. And then the digital experience piece that I talked about, where we're sort of able to look and predict at what's causing you potential slowdowns in your environments. We recently announced a very powerful tool called Risk 360. This is huge because I don't know whether you work in IT, but if you do or you don't, it doesn't really matter. This is going to make sense to everybody. So if you want to show this, for example, to your board of directors, if you want to show this to the leaders of your business, they're going to understand the concept of risk to their business. And of course, that's really what we're talking about when we think about cybersecurity. What's the impact to our business? And we're able to use AI to make a pretty accurate score assessing the level of risk that you have with the posture you have in place today. And of course, we're all aiming to get that down. That's where recommendations come in. We've got those built in to try to help you just improve your risk score, essentially. I mean, this doesn't stop. We're working really hard in this area. We're making new investments in this space to really take full advantage of all that information we have. So coming up, we have a tool called Breach Predictor. It's going to look at your posture. It's going to say, look, you are at risk in these specific areas, and it's going to recommend changes that you can make to go in and improve your stance. And then Copilot, this is about natural language for the product itself so that you can interact with Zscaler Zero Trust Exchange. You can ask questions, you can get answers. You can really just achieve more before you pick up the phone to call our support team. Also want to talk about services that Zscaler puts in place for the benefit of everybody, not even just Zscaler customers. And so there are a few examples of this out there, and ours is called Threat Labs. It's a research team that we maintain. We have employees who are dedicated to this space, and they're working constantly around the clock looking at potential new threats that are coming up on the internet, and so things that we need to react to and build protection against. So this is a significant team that we're investing in, and that information is actually shared out with the general public, the industry at large, so we don't keep this information to ourselves. This is really important. I mean, it's part of being a member of the internet community that we share these vulnerabilities with each other so we can protect as quickly as possible when something new comes up. And that, of course, is happening all the time. You can see some data there on the screen around the amount of threats that we were able to identify and prevent within a 24-hour period. This is why we're in business. This is what we're here to do for you. Now, it takes a village to do this well because, of course, we know that you're going to be connecting to applications that are hosted out there on the internet or on other service providers. We don't have full control over those, but we do have ability to help protect your access to them, as we've been talking about. So we help you connect to all these services you see at the top here. And of course, this is just examples, whether they are hosted on the internet, whether they're hosted on private services, Google Cloud, AWS, Azure, or even in your own private data center. We can get that covered. But we then also work with best-of-breed platforms that already exist to provide different aspects of what we're doing. So you'll, of course, recognize some of these names on here. These are the biggest names in their respective areas. And what we're trying to do here is leverage the best of the best to provide you with the best possible security posture built around zero trust at the center. So we act essentially as the broker for all of this to make sure that we're taking full advantage of these services to connect you safely.
All right. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are listening and thinking, hey, this makes sense. Zero trust sounds like the way to go, but where do I start? Where do I start this journey, which is what it really is? Maybe in terms of some key initiatives or starting points, what would you have to share with those folks?
Yeah, it's the number one question. Where do I start? Because it's a little bit hard to visualize, especially if you are working that full network-centric security architecture today. Feels like it might be quite a leap to get to zero trust. Well, fortunately, that is not the case at all. We can actually start with what you already have, and then just think about some of these leading customer use cases. This is what most of the time we see customers wanting to talk to us about. I'm actually going to focus on that one in the top left-hand corner, Secured WFA. Sorry for the three-letter acronym. It's IT, what can I say? Work from anywhere. So we're going to talk about that one. That's really what we started this whole presentation off with. But you can see these others on here. These are reasons why people pick up the phone and talk to us to get started. They're typically some kind of compelling event. Maybe it's just the desire to do a secure digital transformation. But that one about secure work from anywhere, I mean, that's a very, very strong use case. So as we mentioned at the very beginning, being able to connect from anywhere, we need to be able to access certain capabilities. So then you start to get into some specific products. We're going to ask you if you want to connect to private applications or to internet hosted applications. And then we've got technologies that sit behind these. I'm not going to go into these in too much detail today. That's for another webinar. But just so you see, these are the services that you typically are going to be looking at to get to this place where your users are able to now go work from anywhere, work in the cafe, have the same level of protection, no VPNs needed, no extension of risk to wherever they are located. And as we do this, of course, we say goodbye to all of these boxes. And we do so progressively. Don't get panicked, because I certainly remember I came from a networking background myself. I would be freaking out if somebody told me that we were going to remove all of these. So the good news here is that you're able to do this progressively. The point being is that you can eliminate these technologies, because that's what we're providing in the cloud with the Zero Trust Exchange. Now that leads to significant potential for savings, both in terms of the hardware. Think about the licensing for all those products. Think about the fact you have to power them, you have to cool them, host them somewhere. All of that goes out the window, and you don't need to be able to maintain them anymore. So the operational savings start to come in. You don't need to have the same network circuits that you were building before. So MPLS will be familiar to many of you. That's an expensive way to securely connect users to each other. That goes out the window. We don't need that anymore, because we're using the power of strong encryption to connect every single user and device to their applications. So in doing so, we're cutting down risk, and we're improving agility and productivity. Those are a little less tangible, but I don't need to tell you the potential impact for your business that those can have. So get out there and have those conversations. I think you'll be amazed at the reaction you get when you start to talk about just how much we can improve security and save you money at the same time. And we've got many customers who have gone on this journey with us. I'm not going to name names, but if you glance your eyes across those quickly, I'm sure you'll see a couple of names you recognize. We're continuously working with businesses large and small to be able to help secure them. And we've got lots of customer information on our website, testimonials, videos, material for you to go and look at. Now, if you're a partner joining us on this webinar, hello, welcome. We also, of course, think about you because we can't deliver this on our own. We absolutely need our partners to help us get this out there and to help spread the word about the Zero Trust Exchange. So we do have a comprehensive partner program. And if you're interested in becoming a Zscaler partner, the website link is at the bottom of the screen there. And maybe it could be a good business. Think about it. We think it's a great way to think about how you can bring Zero Trust to more and more customers out there.
Excellent. Well, Simon, I have one more question before we shift to our Q&A. And that question is, for people that are listening and they're saying, okay, got it, we'll start with this work from anywhere type of initiative, but what's a more practical next step? So what's something really accessible and concrete where, right after this call, I can go pull this lever and I'll start learning more or diving deeper. What are some of those practical next steps?
Yeah, I think that's where we need to wrap things up. And so let's get into those. Here's some fun stuff that you can try out yourself right after we finish this webinar. Please don't go to it right now. We haven't finished yet. But go to testmydefenses.com afterwards, and you're going to see some tools that you can play with right away to start looking at your potential risk where you are. The beauty of this is not just for your own edification. It's also so you can show others in your organization. If you're in a position of being able to potentially influence decisions around what to do on security, show them this tool, show them the potential vulnerabilities that they have. This is not as comprehensive as what I was showing you earlier with the more advanced Risk 360, for example, but it's a great way to start. It does do some nice tests to give you a sense of where you stand. So take a look at those after we're done. And also, we have a free interactive whiteboard workshop that we run. It's approximately every month. And this is a great way to go along and talk in real time. You can actually get on and talk to our Chief Technology Evangelist, Brian. He knows more than I'll ever know, I'm sure, about Zero Trust. And so you want to get in there. If you've got any quirky questions, he's going to be able to whiteboard with you and help you understand anything that I didn't make abundantly clear during this webinar. So there's the link. Do take advantage of that. I even hear that there are free snack boxes for attendees of that. So if you needed any incentive, that should be it right there. All right, this is the last slide, and then we're going to wrap things up today, get into the Q&A. A couple of QR codes for you if you like those. Otherwise, go to the website, go to zscaler.com, and you'll find these as well. We'd love you to get onto a demo so we can show you the product a little bit more real time directly with you. And we also have a very extensive webinar program. We've been growing that this year to try and provide you with as much detail as you need. So we can go into much more, of course, on all these areas I've brushed over during the course of this introductory level webinar. So do have a look at those, see if there's anything else. And that quote at the top there, super important. This was written in 2010, 13 years ago. Today is a good day to take action on Zero Trust networking. So next best day is today, 2023. Go for it. Okay, so with that, I'm going to wrap things up. And Jacob, do you want to take us into the Q&A?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much for that, Simon. And as was just said, as we move into Q&A here, if you have a question and you have not yet asked it, please type it in, please ask it, and we're going to get to as many as we possibly can. So first question, can we have multiple private applications open simultaneously and for most of the workday? And presumably this is if Zscaler is in use.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is important to understand that we're not connecting you literally to one application at a time. But what we are doing is ensuring that each connection you make has its own separate session. So that means that we can tear down any of those. If something changed, for example, let's say that suddenly you were attacked with a virus, or let's say suddenly we don't want to be doing business with that partner company anymore. We can just cut off what we need to cut off when we need to. So you can absolutely connect to as many public and private applications as you need to at any one time. We just managed to keep those separate from a management perspective so we can protect them individually.
Perfect. All right, now next question. A few of you have asked this one. Can I get these slides?
Aha. Yes, the old classic. Absolutely. So, well, what we don't do is we don't share out the slides themselves, but we always do record these webinars. And so we'll make an on-demand version of this available to you. And I think that's the best way. Go through and review the content, make sure that you're getting the message straight. So that's probably the best way to do it. We do also run this webinar. We're aiming to do this at least every month. So, and that's live as well. So if you've got anybody else you'd like to come along, or if you'd like to just come along and enjoy the whole thing over again, then you can always do that.
Okay, excellent. Next question. Do I need, and you alluded to some of this already, but maybe a double click briefly. Do I need to rip and replace everything in my environment for Zero Trust?
Yeah, and I touched on that briefly because I understand. I mean, it's really an understandable fear. It does feel like you might have to do that. Ultimately, what you want to think about is the destination is, of course, different to what you have today, and it can potentially eliminate all those boxes I showed you on the slides. But you don't go straight from A to B. There's no rip and replace with Zscaler. What you do is you put in Zscaler. It's essentially like an overlay. You can think about those secure tunnels we're building. They're going to sit on top of whatever you already have in place today. But as soon as you've got them in place, you're going to figure out, as many of our customers have learned themselves, that you can start to turn things off. You can start to remove things because they're just not needed anymore. The network ultimately just becomes plumbing. It's just there to connect you from A to B. We take care of all the protection, all the security aspects of your work.
Okay, great. Now, I'm going to try to synthesize, combine a few questions here because they're all roughly asking about the same thing, which has to do with the fact that, in particular, for a lot of large companies, they're increasingly looking to consolidate networking and security, kind of a sideways glance at SASE here, when possible. And so they're asking about the ability to basically connect their branches up to the Zero Trust Exchange. So kind of combining a few questions there. Can you speak to that?
Yes, it's an area where we're focusing quite heavily at the moment. We're really thinking beyond just the users. That's how we built our business initially. But of course, there are more and more use cases where people want to take advantage of this zero trust concept. So what we're trying to do is open it up to everybody and to everything. And that's crucial. So it's not just people that we're connecting, it's workloads, it's IoT devices, OT devices, it's business partners we're working with. And we're providing the ability to just host all of those and protect them all through Zero Trust Exchange. If you don't have a client connector, let's say you're a customer or a visitor, a guest visiting a site perhaps, then there are ways that we can still connect you securely through to applications and services, just using a different technology than the client connector. So absolutely, it's really intended to be an architecture that can be used by everything that needs a connection between point A and point B.
Great. And then the follow-up question I was going to ask, which you may have just touched on, so let me know if you want to jump forward to another one, is what about users without client connector?
Yeah, and that's really very similar to the question I just answered. There are ways to do this just through your web browser. So you don't need to have the client connector application installed to be able to take advantage. So again, if you're a guest user, you can jump on in that way and just use your browser, and we will take care of the security through a secure connection from your browser itself.
Perfect. All right, now next question. We've already started introducing Zero Trust, but how can we make it a more mature model?
Let's think about that. Well, it means you've started your journey, so that's wonderful. And I'm going to guess that if you've started your journey, then you've started with the users. You've started to think about how you can enable your remote employees. I think the next steps to really take it to the next level is to start to think about the devices. One of the ones that we've really found interesting as we've talked to customers is IoT devices. Many of people we speak to have no idea how many IoT devices they have on their site, let alone what they're doing on the internet. And of course, these are devices that are designed to be connected to a network. In many cases, they connect off to servers for their firmware updates and so on. They don't have any real knowledge of what they're doing. So we're working hard at that. We're trying to improve that ability to both find those devices, help you find them in your environment, so you're removing shadow IT, and also then to protect what they're able to do. And this extends as far as you like. So if you're doing mergers and acquisitions, perhaps with another company or divestitures, you can use the Zero Trust Exchange to help accelerate that process, make it far simpler than it is when you're trying to untangle networks to connect them together or to separate them.
Great answer. All right, well, I think that's as good of a time as any to wrap things up, as we're running short on time. So, hey, thank you so much for your participation, everyone. Lots of good questions here. I am very aware of the fact that we didn't get to answer all of your questions. So if we did not, we will be reaching out. You will get answers to your questions. But again, Simon, thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise. And to everyone in attendance here, thank you for your time and your consideration as well. One final note, that you should absolutely take a look at downloading those free resources in the dashboard in front of you, as well as those resources that Simon mentioned, and for which you can see some QR codes on the screen here. So thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.